Not too long ago, I made a video talking about the experience I had with completing all of the quests in Monster Hunter 1's village. And while that's not really, all that special, since they're designed to be played solo anyways. In fact, it's actually less than if you played the US release because there are actually more quests in the village. However, very recently, I actually ended up completing all of the quests in the town portion of the game in the low rank part, solo as well. And I think that's a little bit more interesting, I guess. Through the use of the MH old school private server, you're actually able to get online with the Japanese version of the game. That's why I chose this version to actually play. And while you can, of course, play with other people, I opted to continue the solo journey because I like putting myself through pain, I guess. Thankfully, there wasn't really too much of a problem sliding into the quests themselves. It's pretty simple. You just go into town, go to the quest board, post a quest, and you're ready to go. There are a few mechanical differences, of course. In Village, you have kind of like a base HP for each monster. And then in low rank town, it's double. So let's say a Kut-Ku has 1,000 health in Village. It's 2,000 health in low rank town. And then in high rank town, which I'll get to eventually, has 3,000 health. So actually the increase from low rank town to high rank town is less, half as much actually, as the increase from village to low rank town. It already did village. I ended up not really feeling it that much. The extra health on monsters that you've already fought, it's kind of funny actually. So when you initially fight those monsters in village, you don't have great gear. So it ended up a lot of the time just taking longer to kill the initial village version of the monster as opposed to actually having good quote unquote gear and fighting the low rank town versions of the monster. And also just learning the mechanics of the game and positioning really helped out, especially with Kut-Ku, which we'll get to in a bit from now. But they don't really tend to survive too much longer than their village counterparts if you know what you're doing. Now, obviously the village version would also go down incredibly fast if you go back with the same gear that you have and you try to fight them, but that's not the point. You also have a lot more shops in the town. Not only can you buy potions now from just like the standard general store in the pub area, but there's like 4 shops in the marketplace, which I guess is good. You want a lot of shops in the marketplace, right? But you can get stuff like mega pickaxes occasionally. The stock actually rotates on a day-by-day basis, I think. So you can sometimes get like claws or scales if you really want to, but some really hard to get items if you have enough money for it. And it ends up actually making a lot of the combining processes and things like that easier as well. So that was very much appreciated, especially since you're going at it solo, so you don't really have friends to help you out. And you really want to be able to last a long time against a monster, since you're not just bullying it to death. You also have a canteen system of sorts. It's also a room system, but the main thing it's for is the canteen. So initially, when you get into the town, you have what's called a pawn room, which is kind of your, place where you have your item box, even though the item box is also in the smithy. But that's where your item box is, and there's a Poogie, and you can save the game. And how this mechanic works, and it's actually kind of sad, because the higher ranked you are, the better a room you get. I don't remember the exact thresholds that you have to reach to get the better rooms, but I think there are 4 or 5, and after reaching a certain HR rank, you are able to pay every single time for a better room. And what this does, in the pawn room, you have a canteen with different, if you've played Monster Hunter before, especially 4, you kind of know how the ingredient system works. You have your meat, your fish, your dairy, things like that, and your vegetables, and you can combine them for meal effects. You don't have anything, as far as I'm aware, like that in town. You just kind of have your 100 health and your 100 stamina, and that's what you get, unless you boost it with like rations or nutrients. But here you can actually boost it before a quest if you want to. It's completely free, which is kind of funny. So if you consider it that way, then you're actually paying for a meal if you want to rent a room, something like that. And while you start out with not great materials or ingredients to make meals with, as you get the better rooms, the ingredients get better and you're able to make better meals. So you can get like 40 health as opposed to 20 or 50 stamina, things like that. And you actually get access to a pretty good option right before you reach high rank, but I had completely forgot about that system and I hadn't even checked. So I didn't even get to make use of it, even though I was pretty excited to make use of it, which I guess is good. Goes to show that you don't need it. You don't have to, you know, fully use it as a crutch. As long as you're able to put up with that 100 health, which is pretty fun, especially if you have the gear that's required or at the very least recommended for the time you spend in low rank. You also get some tickets for staying there, but a lot of the tickets you get, I don't think I'm going to find useful, but even though you don't get to make use of them until later in high rank, so they're not really important for low rank either. On top of the extra health though, the monsters actually deal slightly more damage and they take slightly less damage. Again, not really much on the defense front that you can tell that's different, other than, you know, a hunt taking slightly longer, things like that, but doesn't really feel that important. And the extra damage is sometimes important. It leads you into getting comboed a lot more if you're fighting a monster a lot, but as long as you're careful, you should be fine. You know, just try not to get hit. That's kind of always the name of the game anyways, but it really doesn't feel that different, I guess. The quest system is a little bit different as well in town. So in Village, you are able to just do kind of the standard Monster Hunter affair of completing certain key quests. A lot of the time it's the full quest rank, but you complete certain key quests and then you'll have an urgent quest. You complete the urgent, you go on to your next rank. You know, that's fairly standard. But in the earlier games, you actually have an HR system, which all games have, but a lot of them don't lock you out from your quest ranks for that, if that makes any sense. It does, but here's how it works. Instead of completing key quests and doing urgents to increase your HR, you actually have your HR points, which again are still in later games, but you don't really accrue any HR points until after you do like the final boss, and then it'll kind of give you your lump sum that you got while leveling up through the game. But here, that's a thing from the start. And how it works is your first quest rank is actually HR 1 through 4. So it gives you access to 1-star quests. But if you want to get access to 2-star quests, not only do you have to complete the urgent, which unlocks at HR 3, so you have to get enough points to get to HR 3 to even do your urgent, but you also have to reach HR 5 before you can actually do your 2-star quests. And that by itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, especially if they're wanting you to kind of learn the game before they put you against larger, stronger monsters. The problem with that is the HR ranks are very ludicrous. It's definitely designed for you to like do a bunch of quests with other people as well, so you're all kind of leveling up together. I don't know if someone else posting a quest means that you don't get the clear or not. I assume it does, but you know how urgents are weird in the later 4th gen games and even 3rd gen games. So I guess I could see it not, you know, working like that, and you have to all do the quest individually as the poster to get it cleared. But for a solo player, and even I guess in a group, this would be a lot easier. But for me, as a solo player, you end up fighting a lot of Yian Kut-Ku, because Kut-Ku gives 220 points if you clear a quest without carding. One of the Kut-Ku. The other one gives 210. They're on different maps, but the first one's very easy. You can clear it pretty quickly if you know what you're doing. You know, stagger its wings, keep it from moving, things like that. You can kill it sub 5, I'd say even sub 4. You know, you can get it done pretty quickly, even solo. And if you have other people, it's probably like 30 seconds if you're really good at it, because you're just going to keep staggering it. You don't have health scaling or anything, so you're kind of just able to bully it to death like that. And the way it starts out isn't actually quite bad. So your initial quest rank going from 0 to 300 is not bad. That's 1 and a portion Kut-Ku, right? So 2 Kut-Kus, essentially. And you might be wondering, why am I measuring this in Kut-Kus? Well, the problem is your higher ranked monsters don't really give any more than like 350, and they take a lot longer than a 3-minute Kut-Ku. They're gonna be like 10 minutes at least, especially in the areas that they put you in, where you're having to deal with Velociprey or Gendrome or Genprey on Gendrome. So Kut-Ku tends to not only be the easiest, but you're not even like getting bad points relatively for it. So Kut-Ku ends up being the most efficient way to farm. And the unfortunate part of that is you're only getting 220 per quest. You start out pretty simple, like I said before, with only having to get 300 points for your first rank. Rank 3 is 600 points, rank 4 is 1200, and to get to your next quest level, you only need 2400, which isn't the worst thing in the world. You're going to get through a lot of that just by doing all of the quests anyways. That doesn't cover all of it, of course. I think you had to do like 2 or 3 Kut-Ku, which is only 600 points, so that's not terrible. But getting from quest level 2 to quest level 3 is a significant increase, to say the least. You go from your 2400 points at HR 5 to 12,000 points at HR 9, which unlocks quest level 3. That's almost 6 times, like 5.5 times the amount that you would have to actually, you know, do for your first quest level unlock. So that's nice. And then going from HR 9 to HR 13, which is your high rank, you go from 12,000 to 31,000. Now, you may think, oh, well, that's fine. If there's enough quests and you do all of the quests, it should get you pretty close, right? And like I said before, for the first quest rank, you're pretty spot on there. There's only a couple of extra quests that you have to do. And if you're like starting the game, you're not doing anything in Village, you're just jumping straight to multiplayer, which I recommend against because you really want to learn it. But if you're just doing that and you're having to grind anyways, you're grinding with your buddies, things like that, you're all making pieces of armor and you need that rare drop, great. You're gonna probably, I'd say, make it to like HR 7 maybe if you're really grinding out a lot. But that's if you're grinding. If you're just doing every quest once, maybe making a weapon or 2 if you don't have something or enough materials for a particular thing, you're not going to get anywhere close. So you're going to be well acquainted with your Kut-Ku quests and what's the fastest way to tackle them that you can handle. And then once I got to the point where I was completely done with all of the low rank quests except the urgent, I was stuck on Kut-Ku for like, I'm going to say 6 hours at least. You can get it really efficient, but it still... It's a lot of time farming Kut-Ku. I think it would be about 6 hours, maybe total farming Kut-Ku. I'd say probably a little bit more than that, but that's a lot of time just fighting one monster. The bright side is that you're farming a lot of Kut-Ku, you're probably not going to need Kut-Ku materials anymore. So not only are you getting tons of quest reward money, but you're also able to sell the stuff that you don't need. So that's pretty nice. You're going to get a lot of money. I think I ended in HR 13 with 6 million or 600,000, not 6 million. That's way too much. 600,000 zenny, which is not a lot if you're making a lot of weapons, but it is quite a lot. I mean, I think you're getting to the 900,000 point if you can't get over 1 million in this game, which I wouldn't be surprised if you can't. So that does actually make a lot of your other quests easier because you can afford to buy a bunch of catalysts if you need to make power juices or just any old thing. You know, potions are actually fairly cheap, but you can spare no expense for pretty much anything you need at that point once you have that much money. So that's pretty nice. The money woes are completely gone. And you end up really not, if you're doing it the way I am, you know, if you just absolutely hate the egg quests, you may have to interact with them if they are a key quest, but never really noticed it. You know, I just did all the quests in a rank, and lo and behold, once I reached the particular HR that I needed to get to, the urgent was just sitting there for me. You can probably grind things if you really don't want to do an egg quest. They don't really reward that much either, unfortunately. The quests don't scale very well either. So Kut-Ku in high rank, just as an example, only gives 320 points, which is only 100 points more, but you're having to deal 50% more damage. So I'd like to have like 110 more points, something like that, which I guess is pretty close. But, you know, for the amount of extra effort and even killing the other monsters, it is kind of sad. Your urgent actually for low rank, your final urgent for low rank 3-star to get into 4-star quests that you have to do before you have to grind a whole other HR rank. I know it's a bit weird. You have to get like 6,000 points from HR 13 or 12 to 13. But your urgent quest is actually Lao. And Lao's actually pretty easy. It took me 2 tries to get him, which you only have to repel him, of course. But you're pretty much just doing Lao things, sitting on his stomach and attacking. I actually finished with Greatsword. I think Lance would probably be fun as well, but Greatsword gets to ignore a lot of the wind press and stuff that he does. But that actually gives 1,000 points. I was very excited to be able to do something other than Kut-Ku and only have to do like 4 or 5 Laos as opposed to doing Kut-Ku. Kut-Ku is probably faster to get that many points because you only have to kill like 5 to get to the point where you're getting 600 points, or sorry, 1,100 points. But Lao is a change of pace, and you also, in the clearing of that particular quest, get some rust stones, which help you get some really good weapons if you get an ancient weapon. And also, Lao materials are good. You can make some pretty good stuff with that. Problem is, your urgents are not repeatable. If you are in the quest rank of the urgent, or before the urgent, that you have to do the urgent to complete to get to that quest rank, that quest disappears. Most of the time, once you get to the next rank, it will be in that rank, but you cannot do it again, which is kind of a bummer because a lot of times it unlocks a new locale that you do once and then you can't go back. Things like that. And Lao was really sad because even though, you know, all the other quests, you do it once, but you can do it again in the next rank, you can't do that with Lao. So you get to fight Lao one time once you complete it. And then after that, nothing until like HR 19, which is the end of the game. So you get to fight low rank Lao one time, and it may be the same monster with the same modifiers. I don't think it is though. It felt a little too easy to be a high rank Lao, but if it is, okay, that's fine. But if not, you just have this low rank Lao that exists for one quest, and then once it's done, you never see him again. You can't ever do the quest again. So I was pretty defeated after that, and I sulked back into the Kut-Ku farming until I got to HR 13. But aside from that, the standard monsters that you fight, like I said before, aren't too bad. The most difficult ones are the new monsters. Also, your chore quests are kind of scaled for multiplayer too. It's just that you have more small monsters to kill, like 20 Velocirays as opposed to like 10 to 12, or 20 special mushrooms as opposed to 5. Things like that. There's like a 15 quest too. And initially I was pretty concerned about that because in this game you have limited gathering spots, and once you exhaust a gathering point, that's it. You can't gather more from it. But it never really ended up being a particular issue. As long as you knew where to look, you were most of the time getting what you needed. And even when you don't, like for the special mushroom specifically, because that's the biggest one, you can actually trade like Felvine or fire herbs, which you can buy back in the town, for 3 or 4 from the veg yielder. So if you're missing only 3 or 4, and if you really run out, you can also infinitely kill Mosswine, and they have a low chance to actually give you a special mushroom as well. So it's technically infinite, even if it is a little bit more annoying than having to go and gather special mushrooms from a spot. Actually, the trading mechanic is quite nice. You can actually do this back in Village, but I never really made use of it because I never really needed to. Here it's actually pretty interesting. So I've been wanting to make the Plesioth Greatsword because it's actually pretty good against water weak monsters. It's better than Divine Slasher actually, if a monster is water weak. And what you can do is, since you need Plesioth fins, and you know how great fighting Plesioth is, if you want to, you can actually get Kut-Ku ears, which are only an 8% drop in low rank, but they are 20 in high rank, and I guess I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. But you can actually take those and trade them with the Veggie Elder for Plesioth fins. So that's actually an easier way if you don't want to touch Plesioth at all to get that. Now, you will have to touch Plesioth, and once you get to that, you probably want to keep that if you, do want to grind materials for Plesioth. Unfortunately, I didn't think I was going to make anything Plesioth related, so I sold all the materials, which made me a little bit richer, but doesn't help whenever you need a particular part. I think the only new monsters, though, that you do end up fighting are Plesioth, Gypceros, and Rathian. Gypceros was kind of the first annoying thing you run into. His legs are hard, so if you're not able to reach the head or the tail, which a lot of times it's kind of hard to with like a hammer, sword, and shield, you're gonna be taking a very long time to kill him. Like, you can knock him over occasionally if you're attacking the legs. Just hope you're not bouncing. You got to use that charge attack from hammer, or anything with Mind's Eye on it. Then you can attack the head, but Gypceros is a time waster monster, and a lot of times he's either running around the map, or he's got this one attack where he will fly to a designated spot in each zone, and he'll just kind of run laps around that zone. And once he's finished with it, you can't actually, stop him. It's set. He'll always stop in the exact same spot, so you can't attack him there. But he can just go right back into it, so he's sometimes running around the map for 15 minutes at a time, which isn't fun at all. Lance has a bit of an easier time, but it's still kind of hard to position around him. And even if you block, he has this attack where it's like Kut-Ku's pecking attack, where it's this, 3-hit thing. It'll tear through your shield real quick because it uses set stamina, and it's not a small amount either. And that can steal, and even if you're blocking, it can steal an item from you. So you really don't want to be blocking that attack as much as possible. Once you get more acquainted with that bird flying wyvern skeleton, you can probably do it a bit better, especially since you can reach the face and the tail. But it still ended up being very cumbersome to fight, even with Lance. So during one session, there was a quest I had to do for a Gypceros, and I used Hammer for it, and it took 35 minutes to complete. And at that point, I was thinking, okay, if I can't reach the tail or the head very easily with Hammer or Sword and Shield, and Lance is just feeling way too slow to kind of pivot around the monster or move around it, there is one other weapon that I hadn't used yet in this game that I was hoping maybe would be a little bit better. And that's, Greatsword, the original weapon. Because the idea is that it has long reach, so it can reach both the face and the tail. It's kind of a hit and run weapon, not quite as much in this game because you can't charge or anything. It is just combo Greatsword. But you also have the ability to roll, which Lance doesn't have. You have your steps, but they're kind of difficult to use. So the next session, I dedicated the entire time just to making the Siegeland, either Siegeland or Sigmund, whatever you call it. I think it was the Rathalos looking one. It was the red one. The first quest I did with that Greatsword was Gypceros, and it was sub 15 minutes. So I was pretty happy with that. And I did, go to realize that a lot of the fights that were difficult without Greatsword were not necessarily faster than something like Lance, but they certainly were more consistent and easy to do. So like on a first run, I would use Greatsword, and then once I kind of got the moveset down, I would switch to Lance and try to learn that so I could kill it faster. This was the case with Kut-Ku. My fastest times in the beginning were with Greatsword until I took Lance and tried to learn how to stagger lock it, at the very least a little bit. I wasn't headlocking or anything. And then that got faster. But Greatsword definitely was a major help in a lot of the more difficult fights. Rathalos was a lot easier with it. Rathian was easier. And the thing is, and I said this earlier kind of when I was talking about WoW, any weapon that has the ability to just completely negate wind press, I'm not even talking about blocking it, really makes the game a lot easier. So Hammer kind of has this. It was the first time I made it and used it, I realized, oh hey, this thing whenever it's charging or whenever it's doing its charged attacks has wind pressure resistance, so it won't be blown back by the wind. Well, Greatsword actually just has that whenever you're attacking, so you can kind of like parry wind press and things like that, which is kind of fun. Like when you're fighting a flying wyvern that does the little jump back wind press attack, and then they wind press when they hit the ground. You can just kind of do a circle slash through that, and then chase and do another circle slash and hit the monster as they're landing, and you're completely fine. So a lot of the annoying moments where like a monster's in the air and landing or doing like random jumps or hops or things like that, you can just kind of ignore that. And it makes positioning a lot easier because you don't have to worry about these big massive AoEs that are possibly going to combo you to death if it, really ends up like that. And I know that, they've kind of always said that the fights were designed with Greatsword in mind, but you really get to feel it here. And it's not just wind press either, just any like little attack that's weak will just kind of go straight through you. You'll still take the damage. It's kind of like the tackle in more modern games, but obviously there's no specific animation or attack that you have to do to block it. It's just any attack you do, you can kind of armor through stuff. So you do have to have high enough defense that you're not getting shredded by tramples or anything like that. But, as long as that's fine and you're managing your HP well, it's gonna go pretty nice. Then we have Rathian, which like I said before, Greatsword made a lot easier, but the problem is the first few quests that you tackle her in have a lot of small monsters in the area. The one in the desert has Epceros in the areas, and maybe another place has Ginprey too, but neither one you really want to be dealing with unless you have Greatsword. Because something like Lance, it's pinpoint, you want to try to aim where you're attacking, that way you don't miss, things like that, especially during your damage opportunities. And Hammer is kind of weak, same with Sword and Shield, they're kind of fast and you can hold a charge with Hammer and kind of pinpoint strike, things like that, but they're not as easily taking care of smaller monsters unless you specifically focus them. The great thing about the Greatsword is that your attacks are so wide swinging that you're going to be hitting multiple things with it if they're trying to crowd around you. So that is nice. It's not going to stop Genprey or Velocipray or Eoprey from jumping, target locking you from halfway across the zone and throwing you over, but at the very least, anything that's slow, like an Apsaros, you can kind of deal with. But the first few quests, I didn't have Great Sword, so Rathian didn't go very well either. It was pretty annoying. And the next one isn't a new monster, it's just Diablos. I don't really like Diablos in this game. It's just, I've said this before, it's Monoblos, but worse because of the infinite rage mechanic he has once he gets below a certain HP threshold. Not really a big fan of that moveset because it's very cheap. You still have your instant tackles. You know, the tail sweeps you can deal with. That's just kind of a generic thing across all monsters. So you learn how to, you know, prepare for that. But the backwards tail sweeps are very annoying because their hitbox is incredibly odd. Sometimes it'll go over you. A lot of times it won't. It'll hit you from behind. You'll try to block from behind or to the side. It won't happen. You'll block from behind again and it will work. That's definitely, I think, my least favorite monster so far. And the last one is Plesioth, which I think I talked about earlier. For how infamous he is, it really wasn't that bad. You know, obviously he's swimming in the water and unless you have sonic bombs, you can't really get him out. I've tried frogs in this game. I gathered a whole bunch in the beginning in the village portion. They don't seem to work as far as I can tell. He normally just locks onto me immediately before I can actually, you know, cast the frog and him get to it. So I don't think that's an interaction. I don't know what else it would be for. So maybe I'm just doing it completely wrong. I don't know. But when he's on land, if you respect them, which you're probably hopefully doing because you know it's a Plesioth, yes, there's big hitboxes. And the tail sweep actually isn't that bad. I think it's worse on the far end of it, away from his body, but if you're like actually close to him, a lot of times you won't get hit. So you can kind of just stay in his leg area, which is a good hit zone anyway. So if you're using Lance, you can either try to poke the stomach or just poke the legs to get a trip, and you'll be fine. You know, you may take some trample damage, but you shouldn't be knocked over or anything. His downs are awful, but that's just kind of a Piscine Wyvern thing where they fall over and then they flop for a couple of times and then they get back up immediately. So it's hard to actually aim anything there, but it's still free damage, so I can't really complain too much and you can get it off a lot. He does seem somewhat prone to getting out of the water sometimes. The first quest that I did with him took 45 minutes, which was rough. The second one I did was a capture quest. It only took 15, I think, sub 20, something like that. And it wasn't as bad. I actually brought, I think, more sonic bombs. I think they give you maybe a couple, but I brought actually a full stack from what I remember. And that's fine. You know, sometimes the sonic bombs don't work. You just throw it, he'll flinch, and then he'll just go back to doing his thing. I don't know if it cues a jump out of the water or if he's just jumping out of the water of his own volition randomly after I throw a sonic bomb. It's very weird, but he seems to be fairly generous in that, and you're able to deal, especially with Lance, enough damage to not really worry about it too much if he's surviving for too long. It is just a learning curve, and it does help to have some experience with the creature. From past games, you can bait out water beams, things like that if you stay far enough in front of him, so kind of leveraging the moveset to your advantage is very helpful, especially with the tail sweeps. You know, you always know it's coming from one direction, so you can stand on the far side and get some free hits in and just move to the legs whenever it gets close, or block it. It does have very high knockback if you're using a shield, so do be careful about that. His shield damage is very high too, but he's not attacking so frequently that it's going to be the end of the world. He will just have to heal quite a bit. Then we get to the egg quests, which I think were the biggest challenge outside of maybe Diablos, but Diablos didn't take more than 3 attempts, I think, maybe 4. The normal egg quests where you can kill the monsters permanently and they don't respawn are fine. You know what you're doing there. And even the ones like in the desert where you have to do like some weird map positioning mechanics, like going on the far side loading zone and spawning on the far side of the map, those are fine. They're still a bit more luck based, I guess, but you can still clear them somewhat consistently. Then you get to the kind of new maps where you didn't have to do things before, and that gets annoying. So I think the first one you'll generally run into is the swamp, and you actually have 2 spots, one for quartz ore and the other for sootstone. And pretty much whatever path you take, you're going to have to run through at least one zone where the monsters are spawning infinitely and they are prey. So, you got to deal with that moveset. One area has Ginpray and Iapray, and the other area has Velocipray. Now, it was pretty much at this point that I realized I was going to have to use Power Juice, and if you don't know what a Power Juice is, it's just a dash juice. Back in Village, I really don't want to do anything like that, because not only could you kind of strategically do the egg quests, but it was a bit expensive to make a Catalyst and Rare Steak. That's what the combine is for a Power Juice. You needed a Bitterbug and Honey, which you can gather, but you have to gather them. However, in the town, like I've said before, you can actually buy a Catalyst, which is expensive, but when you have as much money as you get from farming Kut-Ku, that's not really an issue, especially just for a couple of quests. You know, you'll generally use 3 since you have to carry the 3 eggs. You know, if you do fail, then you'll probably use all 5, but you can also bring combines and things like that. You would think that's free, like, oh, I'm just using a Power Juice, I can outrun all the monsters. But you can't. They're still fast enough, the preys especially, are fast enough to where they will catch up to you. Sometimes you do get lucky and they'll just kind of not attack and they'll just stare off into space and you'll get out of their attacking range. That's nice. But a lot of times they'll do that homing hop where it just, you know, closes distance. They'll go over you sometimes. They'll make very clear contact with you sometimes. They won't knock you over, thankfully. And then sometimes they won't make contact with you and you will still fall over. And both zones are loaded with those monsters, whichever way you want to go. There is one area that has, if you're trying to go through the Velocipray route, there's an area with Vespoid too. Those aren't an issue. If you have infinite stamina, you can just outrun them. Even if you have, you know, regular stamina, you can kind of strategically move around them. Most of the time when they go to attack you, they'll stop in place and do that little stinger attack. Sometimes they'll do a headbutt that moves them forward, but that's pretty telegraphed, so it's not really an issue. Occasionally you will have a large monster, depending on the swamp quest that has you delivering something. I think most of the time it's either Gypceros or Rathian, maybe Bucerios too, but they're not that bad. The large monsters, if it were just a large monster by itself, the worst thing you have to worry about is the roar. All the other attacks are somewhat slow enough as long as you don't get yourself into a corner that you cannot dodge a tackle from. But really your main concern are the prey enemies. So whichever path you try to take, you're pretty much trying to alert as few of them as possible. There's like 8 Velocipray in that one area, and I'm sure there's a similar amount in the Ginpray area. The Ginpray area is actually shorter, but you're going to alert a lot more of them. The Velocipray area, you can actually do kind of a wide path around and only alert like 3 or 4, which isn't ideal, obviously, but it's better than nothing. And again, if you do have a Power Juice going, it helps a lot. You don't have to slow down. You can just kind of keep running as fast as you possibly can. There's no real strategy to it. You can try to run in a straight line and sometimes you'll get it, and you can try to kind of play around them, and sometimes that won't just work because homing hops and they'll kind of directionally influence their jump, which is very annoying when it happens, but you can't really do anything about that. You just gotta hope you get it through. The other 2 maps are slightly more interesting. I'll say the least difficult one out of these next 2 is the jungle map. So pretty much start in the base camp and you'll take your right paths all the way down to the egg area. And there are, I think, other Iapray or Ginpray in there. You can actually kill those, so they will not spawn back, so that's great. And funnily enough, Rathian actually starts in that area, but she moves pretty quickly, so you don't have to worry about that, and that seems pretty consistent. But when you pick up the egg and you try to go up that right path, which would now be your left if you're going back up the map, there's like 5 or 6 Bullfingo in that area. I don't know if they spawn after. I think it's Vespoid or Hornitar at first, and then they turn into Bullfingo. So a cramped area with a bunch of Bullfingo is a bit annoying, but once you get kind of used to the patterns, you know how to manipulate them. You're still going to get hit occasionally, but at the very least, it's almost perfectly in your control. You just have to be good at managing a bunch of different lines aiming at you. And if you can get them all, you know, grouped together, it's a lot easier because they're going to be shooting in a similar spot. But, you know, it's still sometimes up to luck if one decides to do a quick tackle or things like that. Once you get through that area, the final area you actually have to walk through has some Velocipray. Sometimes the Rathian can go to that area too, but again, it's not the end of the world, and half the time she's not even there anyways. But you still have to deal with the Velocipray. There's only like 2 or 3. that you actually have to deal with. Most of the time, I think it was only one, though, that actually locked onto me. So you still have to deal with that, you know, is he going to jump and hit me, or is he just going to jump and go over me? But other than that, it's not completely terrible once you understand what you have to do. By far the worst one, though, is the Powder Stone quest in the volcano. So this quest always has an Gravios spawning, and Gravios is pretty big, so that's a larger hitbox you have to avoid, and he has a very far-reaching roar. This is, I think, by far the longest route you have to take. Maybe Forest and Hills is about as long, but the thing about Forest and Hills is that you don't have to deal with really anything as long as you kill the monsters first. In this particular map, though, the first area that you have to get through with the Powder Stone has 3 Eye of Prey that lock onto you, and of course they're prey, so they're gonna be annoying like that. Then the next area has 5 Bullfingo, which are Bullfingo. It's a wide area. There's ups and downsides to fighting them in a smaller area compared to a larger area. The larger area can kind of spread them out a little bit more, which makes it worse. You're having to dodge multiple things from all sides. The sad thing about the area that you first see the Bullfingo in is that the exit to that zone is, and the most efficient exit, I'll say, is a very long corridor. So you're having to dodge these sight lines coming at you, if that makes any sense, and all while you're in this little tight, tiny corridor. And that little loading zone takes a lot longer to get to than you would think. But once you get through that area, you know, you may think you want to avoid that and go a different way, but the reason you want to go through here is that the next 2 areas do have Bullfingo, but after you kill enough of them, they will stop spawning. So that's kind of a free spot. Once you get through those Bullfingo, those first Bullfingo, you'll be fine to go through. Now, there are 2 other paths you can take. The problem with that is the first side path you can take has Apsaros in the area, and the second side path you can take has Eye of Prey. And in fact, the second area you can take, I don't think I'm saying this correctly. You have the first area, which is the correct path, and then the second area, which is Apsaros, which leads to Apsaros, Eye of Prey, and then Apsaros again, or Bullfingo, depending on the path you want to take. And then the third one, which may seem like the best one, still has the Bullfingo, Eye of Prey, Bullfingo, or Apsaros that you have to deal with. So I think just having the Bullfingo that you actually can kill as opposed to the Apsaros and the Eye of Prey that you can't, it's a lot more useful. But once you learn what monsters you can kill, it is a lot more helpful and, you know, feasible. You just have to learn what things you have to brute force your way through. Once you get that, it's only a matter of time before you clear it, even if it is still annoying. And it's such a long path that your dash juices, your regular ones at the very least, don't last as long as you would like them to. But thankfully, they last long enough for you to get into the clear zone, and then you don't have to worry about anything else. I do think that particular Powder Stone quest was probably the one I had to retry the most often, if we're not like counting bad Kut-Ku runes or things like that. Problem with Kut-Ku is once he gets away and you don't have a paintball on him, it's kind of hard to find him if you don't know that he's limping. So if he's limping, he always goes to the same spot. But if he's not, I figure just to abandon and better get a good run going at it. That way I can kill him in the first area, hopefully, as opposed to chasing him around for 5 minutes. And really, of all challenges, quote unquote, the grindiest one is obviously going to be the HR grind. It's not difficult per se, but you're going to be sinking most of your time into that. So far, I've got 117 hours in the game, which I'm sure some of that is just kind of letting the game set while I'm doing other things, but I'd say a lot of that is a lot of gameplay. I don't think Kut-Ku has made a significant portion of that yet. A lot of the other grinding monsters have made up that time, but it will certainly get up there. I probably said this before, but I've cleared the first section of high rank 2, and now I am in the longest stretch of grinding, I think, in the game that it's going to be, because you're having to get from 31,000 to 83,000, which is just ludicrous. So I'm trying to supplement that with some grinding. You know, I think that would be smart to do. That way I don't go completely crazy, but the grinding I'm doing right now is still just Kut-Ku. It's high rank Kut-Ku though for the ears, so I can get Plesioth wings. But once I get the Plesioth sword, hopefully the low rank Kut-Ku will go down a lot faster, and maybe it won't be as bad of a grind. But Lance still may end up being better. I don't know. We'll see. Either way, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed my rambling session. I'm having fun with the game for sure. There's still that element of really wanting to play the game a lot of times. Like I'll get into a grinding, chance, like especially when I first got into high rank, I really wanted to just play the game and get a lot of the new materials that I could get to. So even despite the frustrations of just Monster Hunter 1 being what it is, hitboxes, small monsters, mechanics, controls, I'm still having a lot of fun with it. Even if it doesn't seem like it in the moment, I think after I have a chance to step back and take perspective, I'm having a fairly fond memory of it. I'm blocking out a lot of the trauma, I guess. I don't know. Either way, the goal is now high rank. Again, I've got a third of it kind of through. There is one quest that I am definitely thinking is going to be the biggest challenge aside from something like Fatalis, and that is 4 horns. It has you killing 2 high rank Diablos, and that is 10,500 health apiece. You do not get reduced health in this game. If you have to fight 2 monsters, you have to fight 2 full monsters. So we're gonna see if that's possible. I think it is. I'm just gonna have to be good at the game, and I'm hoping that's what the water sword will help with, because Diablos is somewhat weak to water. Either way, thank you once again for watching. Let me know your thoughts if you've played the game. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you like this type of rambling that I'm doing, or is it just droning on for too long? Probably is, but hopefully it's at the very least enjoyable to someone. Either way, have a nice day. Goodbye.